South Africa's President Jacob Zuma says the recovery in South Africa's economy is too weak and is hampered by tumbling commodity prices. Mike Schussler, economist and director at Economist.co, joins me now. Mike, do you think President Jacob Zuma's comments saying South Africa's economy is too weak are justified?
No, I don't think they're justified in the sense that we had a very weak first quarter, but that was due to technicalities in the seasonal adjustment. And without going into great detail, the fact of seasonal adjustment, it takes things to normal. But when your March has an extra public holiday, plus your main provinces have 6 extra school holidays, which they typically do not have in March, it does influence your output. So we're likely to see a bit of a bounce back in April. And we already got the PMI for May, which shows positiveness, as well as second-hand and first-hand car sales, which are all positive. But I'd like to just say it doesn't mean that the economy is going to be very strong. We're probably going to have less than average growth. But I think overall, South Africa's economy, just like the rest of the world, is also pretty slow, but not as slow as the data recently showed, because that is a technical flaw.
And do you agree with his view the weak economy is being restricted by falling commodity prices and a wave of labour unrest in Africa's platinum mines?
I agree that we have a problem with labour unrest at the moment, and that we do have one or two things, such as, for example, we had a fire damage to the biggest steel factory in South Africa. And there's no doubt that weak commodity prices will influence South Africa negatively. And there's no doubt in my mind that we are not going to have a great year of growth. But the growth that we have is, given the world growth, going to be slightly below the average of world growth, which is going to be around 3%. But it's not so weak that we shouldn't be able to do anything. And I think from where we're sitting, we're seeing massive government spending still, but unfortunately mainly on salaries and social welfare, and not so much on infrastructure as was promised. That always seems to be delayed. And I think if we can spend that money on infrastructure, we will see a pickup in the economy. But again, we do not expect growth to be above average, but below average. And in South Africa, average growth is around 3.4%. Let's say South African growth is going to come in around 2.5%. So we're not looking at a great growth, but for a president to call an economy's growth too weak is a little bit over the top.
Moving on to growth, Zuma says if we don't get faster growth, Africa cannot reduce unemployment, poverty and inequality successfully. Do you think this is true, and what are your forecasts for growth going forward?
I absolutely agree with him that our growth is too weak to get rid of unemployment. There's no doubt about it. But there are also structural factors in unemployment. We had a very bad education system during apartheid. There's no doubt about that. But we don't seem to have improved it in the last 19, 20 years. So we're in effect not training people well enough, and that might be part of our problem as well. The inequality comes from that same unemployment, and the fact of South Africa is that, yes, there are a few people that get paid very well, as in many other countries, and the vast majority which get paid, let's say, less well. But the big difference is between the people that don't have any income and those that have income. And I think that's the real big difference in South Africa that we've got to address. And the president is quite right with that. I don't doubt that for a minute. But going forward, I think we need better growth to address some of that unemployment. But the vast majority of that unemployment is also because we're asking unrealistic salaries from people who don't have realistic qualifications to interact in the modern world. Today you need some sort of ability to read and write as a minimum, and we've addressed that to a large extent, but not completely. And today you also probably need some form of IT skills, mathematics, science, that type of stuff to interact with the modern world, or the ability to think things through logically, or whatever the case may be. And very often when people do not complete school, that is exactly what they don't have.
And the rand gained the most in 11 months after a 4-year low in May. Why do you think this was, and what factors could threaten the performance of the rand going forward?
Well, I think the rand, quite frankly, overdid its fall, but I don't think we're going to make a complete comeback. But what we have at the moment is that we probably got an overweak currency because people are very concerned about our current account because of those lower commodity prices means that South Africa is not going to earn as much and we're going to need more in foreign inflows. And foreign inflows are not going to come if you have below average growth. So I think, those are the things that are going to happen. But with a weaker rand, because it will still be weaker, remember we've come from about 7 rand to about 10.28, and that's in about 18 months. We're probably going to see a pullback to, say, 9 even, or 9.50, or maybe even 8.50. Nobody can tell that. But the fact is the rand will remain weaker, and it should help our manufacturing exports and our manufacturers and farmers to compete with imports. So that should be positive for growth, at least in the next 18 months to 2 years. And I suspect that next year's growth then might be a bit better, and that in itself might help the currency improve again, which will then, again, obviously end up making our exports more difficult. So by 2015, we might see further drops in the rand again. But I think at this moment in time, I think in the long term, I expect, because of inflation differentials, a current account and a budget deficit, I think the rand is more likely to decline over the longer run, although in the short term, in the next few months, I think the rand is going to make a bit of a comeback.
That's all for now, but stay tuned to Dukascopy TV for more exclusive interviews and updates. Goodbye for now.